A cellmate who couldn't handle prison. If you're considering taking an all expenses paid holiday at Her Majesty's pleasure, then hopefully hearing the story of one of my most memorable cellmates will help change your mind and convince you to live a life free of crime. I encountered this first person in the first prison I ever went to, which was Brinsford Prison in Birmingham. It was and still is a young offenders prison, which is from the age of 18 to 21. Now, the wing I was put on housed many really evil characters. Many were inside for ending a person's life, and believe it or not, worse crimes than that. A few of the lads on the wing already knew each other, were in the same gang, or had mutual friends on the outside. As I lived nearly 50 miles away, I entered the prison not knowing a single soul. After my induction, I was put onto a wing and into a cell with a guy named Tong. Tong was a very tall, scrawny guy with messy hair and a constant gormless expression on his face. Imagine Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. He was around 20 years old, and I forget the reason he was even in prison. He wasn't the smartest of guys, and he was having a seriously hard time on this particular wing. He had already been on the wing for a few weeks before I became his cellmate. When I first went into his cell, he was smoking a rolled up cigarette filled with tea leaves from a tea bag because the other inmates had conned him out of all his tobacco. As it was my first time inside, I was very nervous about what to expect and extremely keen to keep my head down and not bring any attention to myself in any way at all. On that first day, I had a few conversations with some of the other inmates on the wing during the 1 hour of being allowed out of our cells, but I mainly kept myself to myself. I could fight, but after hearing the reasons why others were in prison, I knew that I was way out of my depth. I could never dream of going as far as these other inmates would to settle an argument. And a lot of these guys on the wing were locked up for doing the most violent things imaginable. And the worse crimes they committed, the more others seemed to respect them. Well, on my first night inside, one gang of inmates on the wing began shouting out of their windows to my new cellmate Tong. They were ordering him to sing nursery rhymes. Tong would stand by the window of our tiny cell and sing out loud "Bar Bar Black Sheep." After he would finish singing a song, they would make him sing another. If he didn't start singing straight away, they would threaten to stab him the following day. I could hear laughter from the whole wing as he continued to sing song after song. At one point, Tong went to his bed, lay on it and wept. He wept like a child, with tears flooding down his face while taking short gasps of air, in a way that most kids do when they're having a crying fit. Watching a grown man cry like that caused me pain. I felt so sorry for him. But what could I do? This was all brand new to me. It was my first day in prison, and I was lost for ideas of what I could possibly do to stop what was happening. He was only laid down on his bed for a few seconds before more threats on his life caused him to be up at the window again singing "Twinkle Twinkle" while tears rolled down his face. As well as the bullying not being a nice thing to witness, after some time it was equally annoying having a grown man yelling nursery rhymes at the top of his lungs in our tiny cell. I remember turning to him after a while and telling him, "After this song, just tell them that you're not doing it anymore, Tong. They're fucking twats who are just taking advantage of you." Tong looked at me, quickly finished the current song he was singing, and then shouted out loud, "My cellmate says that I'm not to listen to you guys anymore, and I can't sing any more songs because you're all a bunch of fucking twats." Oh my days, you should have seen the look I gave him. I couldn't believe that he'd just thrown me under the bus like that on my very first day. Fortunately for me, after only seeing me once, the other inmates must have still been trying to weigh me up at this point and chose to leave Tong alone for the rest of the night. From then on, in Tong's eyes anyway, I became his guardian angel. Now, when you go to prison in the UK, you're issued prison clothes, but you keep whatever footwear you wear to court. Nearly all inmates were wearing trainers, but as I had worn a suit to court, I was in smart black shoes. So picture this, I wore a baggy prison issued sweater, baggy prison issued jogging bottoms, and smart black shiny shoes. I look absolutely ridiculous. During my first week, Tong heard me moaning about my shoes and offered to give me his trainers in exchange for my shoes, on the condition that I have his back and watch out for him. He said he wouldn't miss his trainers as they weren't designer. I didn't care one bit whether or not these were designer trainers. They fit me and allowed me to no longer feel as stupid as I thought I looked. And since the bullying on Tong had all about stopped, I accepted his offer and said that I would have his back. The only issue was that after this, I could not get any peace. I couldn't leave the cell without Tong following me every step of the way. If I wanted to walk around in peace on the prison yard for the 1 hour a day I was allowed out of my cell, Tong would be walking right next to me. If I was chatting to another inmate, Tong would be standing by my side. If I made a phone call, Tong would sit by the phone the whole time. Being a young man, I sometimes wanted to do what many young men do when they're alone, if you get my drift. So when the officer would come to let us out for the 1 hour a day, I would say that I wanted to stay in my cell alone. But oh no, that could not happen. Tong wouldn't leave our cell without me, and he would tell the officer that he was also staying. So I'd have to end up going outside regardless, just to have Tong follow me around the whole time. It started to really do my head in. Although the bullying had stopped, Tong would still cry himself to sleep most nights. I could only comfort him so much though. It wasn't like I was an expert on prison. It was my first time, and I was trying to tell myself that everything would be okay and address my own worries and fears about the situation that I was in. On a regular basis, Tong would think of ways to end his own life and talk about doing it while gasping for breath between sobs. I would tell him that it would be a waste of a life and to think of his family and what his future could be when he's released. He let me know that no one on the outside cared for him and that he didn't see any kind of future for himself. So what was the point in living? Tong's main idea was to rip his bed sheets, make a rope out of them, tie one end to the top bunk bed's bars, and put the other end around his neck and just let his body take the weight until he was unconscious and eventually gone for good. I always told him that I would never let this happen, and he would tell me that he would wait until I was asleep and do it silently. I didn't know what to think or do. At the time, Tong was on remand, which meant he hadn't yet been sentenced. So he didn't know whether he would be out in a few months or a few years. I contemplated whether me stopping him from committing the act was even my decision to make, and I questioned what right I had to intervene. Should I prevent Tong from doing what he truly wanted, or should I allow him to end his misery? What if I left before Tong and the other inmates began to again cause him even more mental and physical pain? Would me allowing him to end his life mean he'll be free from a worse pain in the future? God knows. Before I went to prison, I once remember having a conversation with a train driver. He let me know that on a daily basis around the country, people end their lives by throwing themselves in front of trains. I always knew this happened, but but not as often as this particular train driver told me it did. He let me know that whenever it happened, it would be dealt with quietly and rarely made public in order to prevent people from having ideas. He let me know that whenever this happened, the train driver at the time would have around 6 months of work with full pay in order to get over the event and life-changing tragedy they'd witnessed. Now, I would be lying if I said that I didn't consider the thought of me getting a reduced sentence should a cellmate end his life in front of me. Now I think about it, I realise that of course a reduced sentence would never happen. Suicide is a normal occurrence in prison and happens on a weekly basis. Fortunately, the thought of me allowing Tong to end his life for that last reason didn't last more than a few seconds in my head, and I managed to keep watching over Tong and kept him going long enough for me to see him released before me. I was so happy when Tong was eventually set free, and wherever he is now, I hope that he's safe and he's happy and not having to resort to smoking tea leaves. That's all I've got time for today. Please hit that like button for me to let me know if you are interested in hearing more. Feel free to subscribe and tap that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that you'll be notified when I release a new video. I would definitely do a part 2 to my crazy prison stories very soon. I've got so many stories to tell, and I've been battling whether or not to tell you about one particular sexual story with a female because it's so unbelievable that I think there's a chance you won't believe me. Anyway, take care. Peace.